to other news now. The SA Photovoltaic Industry Association, representing the solar industry, has launched a new data portal that can show you how much solar power has been installed in different parts of the country. Some evidence to show that around 65 billion rands worth of solar generation capacity has been installed since April last year. That's having a big impact in preventing load shedding. Wet Taljaard is a technical specialist at the SA Photovoltaic Industry Association. Wet, good afternoon to you. What does this portal show us?
Good afternoon, Stephen, and good afternoon to all the viewers. I think what the portal shows us really is the amount of solar PV being installed, and it really quantifies the growth that we've seen in the installations in the last while. What's really interesting is to see the quarterly growth. So from quarter 4 of the end of last year up until the end of quarter 1 this year, we've seen 1,200 megawatts of new solar PV capacity being added in South Africa. So that represents about a stage of load shedding in new capacity being added.
Can you actually get this information on a sort of regional basis? Can you tell us what's happening in Joburg or what's happening in Cape Town?
Yeah, so I think that is really the beauty of the data set. It allows, policymakers, the general public, investors, and specifically SAPVIA members to really understand the installation patterns, the growth rates within specific provinces. But also at a deeper level, it allows the users to look at growth rates not only within specific metros and municipalities, but you can also look at the growth rates per land use classification. So you can look at the growth rates from a residential point of view, commercial and industrial point of view, and also on mining and agricultural land use cases. Just as an example, the growth rate that we've seen in the residential solar PV sector from the end of quarter 4 last year to quarter 1 2023 is 136%, and slightly lower growth rates in the commercial and industrial space of around 45%. So really high growth rates being seen across the different market segments in the solar PV space.
And I suppose one of the things that's so interesting, you talk about policymakers. So, for example, Cape Town was, as far as I know, the first major metro to say to people, look, we'll buy your electricity. And then Joburg followed them, although I'm not aware if it's actually working in Joburg. I know it is in Cape Town. But you'd be able to tell what impact that has, that incentive actually has. You'd be able to, in 6 months' time, say, well, this is what happened in Cape Town. This is what's now happened in Joburg. Now, if you're Mangaung, for example, or Tshwane, you'd be able to look at Cape Town and Joburg and say, well, if we do the same thing, this is the impact it'll have.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the use cases of the data is to really evaluate the impact of policy at a municipal level to influence the uptake of solar PV. I think it's interesting that you say the city of Cape Town. From the data that we've seen, it's actually the city of Tshwane that has the highest solar PV penetration rate across all land use cases. So that's residential, commercial, and industrial. But specifically in terms of residential installations, the city of Tshwane has the highest penetration rate at about 14%, but they've also got the highest number of residential solar PV systems, followed closely by the city of Cape Town in second place. So I think it's really interesting to look at these data points and understand from a policy point of view what's driving that uptake, but also looking at wider municipal supply as an implication or as a reason for that solar PV uptake.
So I suppose it may be that some councils have a more reliable supply of electricity despite load shedding than others.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's what we are seeing coming out of the data. I mean, mind you, it was only launched on Thursday last week, so we're still trying to really understand how the data can be used by different stakeholders in the industry. And I think as we move forward, having released the data and we interact with different, members, both from a private and a public sector, we will find really interesting use cases of the data. And that is really what we envisaged with this data set being released. It's to empower and to enable those sorts of decisions being made with accurate data at hand.
Where do you get the data from? You get it from your members, so people who are installing solar power. Would that be right?
No, so we tried that as an organization previously, and we had mixed results. So we tried a different approach. We actually partnered with a South African-based entity called GeoTerra Image. They are a GIS software and Earth observation data company. So fundamentally what they do is they analyze satellite imagery and they extract information from that imagery and use that information in various different applications. So it was quite interesting for us to find that to train an algorithm to look for solar PV panels instead of new houses and new roads was relatively simple. So the premise is that the satellite imagery is analyzed for new solar PV panels, and from that information, we can then determine the size of the PV panel from an installed capacity point of view, and we can then group that data according to suburb, municipality, province, but it really goes down from stand level all the way up to a national overview.
That's incredible. I must say, that's not the answer I expected at all. I was expecting you to say it was your installers. That's fascinating. There's been, as you know, Devet, a huge demand for solar power in South Africa. And at one point, I mean, it really seemed quite crazy how much demand there was. People couldn't get enough panels. They couldn't get enough batteries. They couldn't get enough inverters. I'm sure somewhere there's a factory in China that did very well out of the South African market. Has all of that sort of supply chain issue sort of bedded down a little bit? Are people now able to get what they want if they want it?
No, it has absolutely, flattened out. That absolute peak demand that we saw at the end of Q1 in beginning of this year. But that was driven by a few different things. I think there was still a hangover from the global supply chain issues, but also it was that real intensity and frequency of load shedding, going up to stage 4, stage 6. That was the primary driver of the solar PV and the battery energy storage components. As we've seen now, the load shedding schedule has subsided a bit. We had a stage 2 in the evenings and no load shedding during the day at the moment, and that has dropped the demand a little bit, but we still see steady demand for solar PV and battery energy storage systems as well.
Maybe people have just run out of money, Devet. It's not a cheap thing. Thank you very much indeed. Do appreciate it. Wet Taljaard is the technical specialist for the South African Photovoltaic Industry Association.